Welcome to the Ex Terra Podcast. The Ex Terra mission is to explore and discuss the business of space and its effect on the national and global economy, as well as life on Earth. How does what happens in space affect your life every day? That's what we're exploring on the Ex Terra website, as well as on this podcast. My guest today is Debbie Nelson, an integrated marketing communications professional with over 20 years experience in research, networking, publications, communications, and event management. Graphene and 2D materials research and commercialization news are topics in her focus at Nixene Publishing, particularly when applied to space transportation and infrastructure. Debbie, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate the invitation.
We'll start off talking about space commerce and graphene, because that's really a very high-tech combination. Debbie, how did you get into that area?
You know, it was really interesting. I had seen a post by someone who was following graphene, and I was very curious. I kept my eye on it for a couple of years and then had the opportunity to get involved in the National Graphene Association's American Graphene Summit in Washington, D.C. That was in 2019. And I just jumped right in with both feet and immersed myself. I'd always had an interest in space. And as I proceeded through the year after the Graphene Summit, I'd met so many people and was invited to join the Nixene team around Thanksgiving time. And in the years since, they've noticed that space is kind of my favorite topic. So yeah, we pay close attention to that as well.
What exactly is graphene? I mean, it's a material that was theoretical until just about 20 years ago, but now there are real products being brought to market. So what is it?
So graphene is a single atomic layer of carbon. Now, they isolated it at first from graphite. And a lot of people have heard the story of taking the Nobel Prize winners, taking the sticky tape and sticking it to the graphite layer by layer, taking it off until pretty soon they had isolated a single atomic layer. When they did so, they found it had all sorts of remarkable properties. And since then, there have been many different ways discovered on how you can make graphene. It doesn't have to just come from graphite. It can be made in the lab. And Dr. James Tour of Rice University even has a new technology where you can zap it with a big pulse of energy, and you can zap garbage, plastic, and reduce it to graphene. So there's a lot of things going on when it comes to graphene, how it can be formed. I wanted to mention that when you talk about graphene, as far as what it can do, that the superlatives are what we call them, because it's the best form of these 9 items that we have in the entire world. So it's 200 times stronger than steel. It's the world's best conductor of electricity. It's a very stable material, and it's non-toxic. It's flexible and transparent. It's the world's most impermeable material, and it has the highest melting point of any material in a vacuum. That's important for some of the things that the scientists use it for. It's 100 times more tear resistant than steel, one of the world's best conductors of heat, and the world's most fatigue resistant material. That's an awful lot of things. And anyone who's talking about graphene, well, what in the world does that mean? And basically it comes down to flakes of graphene that are isolated, like we talked about with the sticky tape. Obviously, they're not doing it that way. But you can take these flakes of graphene and disperse them, mix them into different liquids. And you can mix them into polymers and resins. And what it does is it makes things stronger. It's kind of like a superhero, stronger, harder, faster, more like electrically conductive. However you want to use it, you can find the right recipe, basically, and use graphene, and it impacts every industry. It's poised to impact every industry. So it's a pretty incredible thing.
And we'll talk about some of those specific uses in just a little bit, but I want to talk about you a little bit as well. Okay. And give us kind of your vitae. Where did you come from? How did you get involved in being a marketing specialist? And Was your previous industry experience helpful as you got involved in Nixene and some of these higher tech projects that you're working on?
Okay, so basically, I'd start out by saying emphatically, I'm not a scientist, but I do enjoy studying. And my editor-in-chief is Adrian Nixon, and he is a scientist, a chemist with the Royal Society of Chemistry in the UK. And he is an exceptionally good teacher. If you've watched any of we have videos on a Nixene Publishing YouTube channel, and he takes something that is very complex and explains it so clearly that you never feel like you didn't know something in the first place. You just are enlightened now to some really high-tech material. So I've studied very hard and gotten into it. So that being said, my background itself in marketing and communications has been, as you said, over 20 years. I was involved in everything from helping people set up websites to getting involved in social media when that came about, helping people communicate their missions to the business community, a lot of small businesses, medium businesses, and hadn't really worked with the largest businesses until now. And it's been an awful lot of fun and a great opportunity. I have my degree from the University of Mississippi and my master's from Post University in marketing. And I just plugged in everything. I considered all of the education things that I'm putting into my toolbox, right? So each of the experiences. So I signed up for an awful lot of things to do and participate in, including NASA Social. So that is what I call giving the backstage tour of what goes on at the NASA facilities. So I had the opportunity to see the capsule that they're using for the Orion capsule for the mission, and got to see the splash test for that. So I have a very cool video of watching that capsule drop into the pool and sit in on their press conference and be part of that press corps as a citizen journalist, and then carry on to the Apollo 50th anniversary over in Marshall. And since then, we've been invited to speak at the NASA Commercial Lecture Series that's held through Ames in California. We did all that virtually, and it's an ongoing process for them. I still attend so that I can learn as much as possible. My personal perspective is lifestyle of learning. So that's what I believe in, that's what I do, and it just keeps everything interesting and fresh. So
tell us then about Define Success and what you do for your clients.
Well, I decided that being a freelance worker was going to fit my lifestyle best. I have a fairly large family. I have 5 adult children in 5 different states. I like to travel. So to be able to work remotely was really important to me. And I've been doing so long before COVID came along. So when they sent everybody home overnight, I became one of the seasoned professionals rather than someone doing something that was a little outside the box. So it's been a great way to be able to do what I love to do and facilitate the things that I really enjoy in my life. Now, what I specifically do and why I called my brand Define Success is because everyone defines success differently. Okay. No matter who you talk to, they'll give you a little bit of a different answer. And so in order to meet the client's needs, you find out what are they looking for? How can I best, place my skills and talents into that to be able to deliver what it is that they're looking for, whether it's being a voice for a brand on a social media channel, or, putting together content for a website or writing articles, things like that. I've done everything A to Z, and I'm really enjoying it. So I try to find out what their mission is and put that forward as best I can to represent them, even if I'm representing more than one at the same time. So
sort of like the WKRP version of marketing, town to town, up and down the dial.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, exactly. And I love doing it. So it's just, it's just a fun thing to do. Yeah.
Let's go back and talk about some of the specific things that can be done with graphene, some of those specific applications, particularly as it relates to space commerce. What are people doing with this material, and what are some of the possibilities?
Well, the possibilities are endless. I've gotten to the point where when someone says, well, could it do this or could it do that? Basically, what it turns out to is, yes, it's just a matter of finding out how. And as I said before, developing a recipe. They've been working on adding graphene to so many things. I think at the beginning it was tennis rackets and golf clubs or golf balls, because golf balls, you put anything in a golf ball, the guys will run out and, and ladies will run out and buy it so that their golf game will improve, right? So, you lightweight a golf ball and it's going to fly much further. So, but you have, the more, I don't want to call it more serious, but the more intense applications for graphene are really impacting things like, sustainability and reducing carbon footprint by simply adding a little bit of graphene into concrete mixture. And when you do that, you reduce the amount of materials that you need. So that reduces the carbon footprint. And the experiments that have been going on most recently over in the UK have just had phenomenal results. In fact, if you follow what's going on over there at the University of Manchester, they continue to have just extremely positive reports on this. So it's making it stronger, it's setting up faster. They're not having to use rebar in the concrete, which is completely unique. So Nationwide Engineering was the company that had the guts to go for it, right? Because you get something in a lab and you figure out what it could do, but you have to scale it up. You have to make it, make it viable for a commercial application. And that takes some money, and you've got to be able to invest a little bit to get that done. So some things kind of get lost in the shuffle and other things get put, right out there. Now, why does concrete matter to space? Well, when you have, let's say, a launch pad, right? You're going to be dealing with an awful lot of heat and force and all the rest of it as this is taking, as this, rocket ships or whatever are taking off. That's a potential use, is the graphene in the concrete for that. Now, I can't say that that's necessarily been done, but I can't say that it hasn't either, because a lot of these people that are doing this aren't exactly advertising all the special secrets that they're using in order to, make their business competitive and excel. As far as what is being done in the space realm, there's a company by the name of Orbex that has 3D printed rockets. Okay, 3D printed rockets. That is incredible. They've got the world's largest, or not the world's, Europe's largest 3D printer that they use to print these rockets and the components for the rockets as well. And that did include graphene in the polymer composite that's been used for Orbex. So there's somebody that you can kind of keep an eye on. What else could it be used in? Well, you name it, and it can be used. You can put it into paints and coatings. It has a significant impact on water filtration, which is huge in space, because every drop of water is going to be like gold, and you've got to be able to recycle, reuse, and whatnot. So graphene water filtration is something that's being looked at. Basically, if you take life off Earth or move some of it from Earth into space, everything is going to be needed in space. And when you bring graphene into the mix, now you've got, like I said, you have things that are lighter, you have things that are stronger, you have things that are tear resistant, you have things that are made from a filtration, like I said, with the water. So it's really up to your imagination on what you can see that could possibly happen.
Something that immediately comes to mind is, if it's a lightweight material, then it might be easier to transport somewhere like, the moon, to be mixed with regolith, to be used in building habitats and infrastructure there, or on Mars or someplace of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And that there have been some studies done on that in specific, and a lot of conversation about that. Because if you're doing that with concrete here on Earth, you could look at what's happening if you mix the regolith with the graphene and, a little bit of whatever fluid you have that you've got to put that in there to make it do what you want to do. And then 3D printing is huge. That's one of the biggest things about going to any other area other than on Earth itself, is bring the material, some of the material, and bring the printer, and then go ahead and print a lot of what you need once you get there. So that's part of it as well.
We're talking with Debbie Nelson, a marketing specialist working in the fields of graphene, 2D materials, and space logistics on the Ex Terra podcast. Debbie, you're also involved in marketing for Stellar Modal. Tell us a little bit about Stellar Modal.
Well, Stellar Modal Transportation Association is a new nonprofit organization. It's a 501c6 organization. And I had connected with John Weathersby, who's the CEO, when we were both working in graphene. The idea initially was inspired by the people who are doing the space elevator. Now, that's a whole nother topic with when you come to graphene in space, because NASA had approved the idea of a space elevator back in 2003. They had tabled it saying we could do this with the current technology in 2003. The only thing we're lacking is a suitable material for the tether. So in 2004, graphene was discovered. Now, I find it fascinating because last year, it was 16 years since graphene had been discovered. People think, well, that's such a long time. Why didn't we get the big superlatives out of it? Why didn't it make all these things, fancy immediately? But you have to realize that when graphene was discovered, it was right at a time when social media came about. You weren't just reading it in the newspaper, or picking up in a magazine. You were hearing it and expecting instant results, right? So the hype went fast and furious, and the disappointment came because people thought, well, if I mix a little bit in, then surely if I mix twice as much or 3 times as much, it'll be much better. But it's like salt in a recipe. You don't add too much salt to your cookies or they taste terrible, right? So they really had to experiment. The people who stuck with it and didn't abandon the idea were the ones that are now doing some really cool things. So I don't want to get off track here, but I could.
But as a marketing person, as a marketing person, you understand that there is such a huge desire for instant gratification now, and social media is not real life.
Yeah, well, people think so. It's interesting because we go to social media for our news. We go to social media to find out, oh my gosh, something just happened. What was it? We dash in there, and then the blessing of social media is that we can get a message out to a broader audience in a much faster way. But the curse of social media is that misinformation is a real problem, and finding who's telling the truth and who's got the hype is a challenge. That's why Nixene Publishing, we put out a journal every month. Adrian Nixon writes, he does a scientific analysis of the news of graphene research, emerging companies, and the emerging applications of graphene. In order to be in the journal, there has to be scientific proof. Otherwise, he'll just say, well, this is something we have to keep an eye on because we don't have anything to back it up yet. We're waiting to get that information. So we want the science, not the hype. And that's something that happens with social media. Going back to Stellar Modal, the idea being from what was going on with the space elevator is that in constructing this elevator from the ground up above the orbits that we have, so LEO, GEO, and all of that, you have you'll need this tether. Graphene is now the most likely candidate for it. They'd looked at carbon nanotubes, but found they couldn't build them. They couldn't construct them more than about 15 centimeters long, and then they'd start falling apart. That was very disappointing for them. But now when you have the sheets of single crystal graphene that's perfect, it needs to be able to have the latest technology is that they would be stacked and formed into a tether that could foreseeably hold the pods to move up and down and move materials into space. In the meantime, we're using rocket ships, a lot of fuel, a lot of launches, and So with all of this going on, with taking life off the planet and putting it out into space, you've got to be looking at space commerce. You've got to look at how the Transportation Association will assist people in achieving their objectives to be able to get their products to where they need to go, whatever that is, and whatever challenges that they're looking at. We aim to facilitate the solutions to those types of things. This fits into my brand because with Define Success, my brand has always been, networking people with solutions, and I've been doing that since 1999. So,
Stellar Modal, though, envisions a standardized platform for commercial transport in support of space commercial activity. Mm-hmm. So then, what are the challenges of promoting what will be rather than what already is?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Tom. And I have to say that when we're promoting what will be, we're really just extending what already is. Because when, as you know, when NASA started, and anytime you start going into space, that is space commerce, and we're already, doing business in space. If you have a cell phone, which, we all do, and you're using GPS in your car or anywhere else, you're using satellite technology, and that's space. So it is, it's impacting your life now, and it's going to continue by bringing more and more things in the future. Doing something for future is just being able to convey the messages that whatever we're doing now, we want to be able to lay out the framework to be able to have a smooth way for people to get that, to transport what they need, to space, just like you do here on Earth. You have a couple of ships back up in the Suez Canal, and look at what a mess it makes getting your items from place to place. The port's back up now, and and a little bit of shortages here and there. That's all supply chain. So our goal is to link the supply chain to space commerce.
So what are some of the drawbacks to that kind of marketing? And I know you're marketing B2B. You're not, your audience isn't the general public so much as it is other companies that will eventually need and use those services.
Yeah, that's very true. Although when it comes to graphene and space, it really is across the board. It applies to everyone and everything, right? So graphene can go into everything. Space, when we're going into space, anybody, that's the whole goal, is they're putting more people into space. Space is for everyone. So, to be able to the drawbacks to this are just to get people thinking forward who are kind of in a very traditional way of thinking and think that it's science fiction or that it's just for the billionaires. And the more people who go and make these attempts and start to get into space, the pace is picking up so quickly. If you've been following it for a few years, you'd see that. And with the pace of graphene, it's just astonishing. So these things really run in parallel, and they're both things that, like I said, it's limitless possibilities. And yes, it does have challenges for the naysayers, to be able to, you don't have to persuade them. We really don't. We have to acknowledge that there are naysayers, and that's okay. But for those that are ready to hop on and go, let's work together and get things done.
You talked a little bit earlier about graphene being able to be made from very common items. Is it an expensive process? Where's the point where it becomes affordable enough to start to realize all of these wonderful things that it can do?
Right. So that's a good question. When it first came out, it was exceedingly expensive, right? And people were very worried about that. People are also looking to see, well, can I make a graphene hat, or can I make a graphene, item? And as it turns out, it's an additive at this point, because it either mixes, or it's what's called CVD graphene, which is it's laid out in a single layer. And it's on what they call a substrate, which is just another layer underneath it to hold the graphene. Right now, the graphene sticks to it, and they're having a hard time getting it off of the substrate. So the big challenge now is to get the graphene off the substrate in a perfect a perfect layer. It's a lattice. It's a lattice layout. If you look at it, when you see a diagram of it, it looks like a honeycomb pattern. They're very thin. As far as the cost goes now, what's happening is that because of the different ways that are being discovered to make graphene, the cost is coming down, and the realization is that you may not use 2 tons in this mix. It may be a much smaller amount in this mix, but you may need 2 tons coming towards your business in order to fulfill the orders that you have. So you have to have the abilities to make it in mass, and they have scaled that up. There are companies right now who can sell it by the ton, and the cost is not prohibitive. So I encourage people to look into it, because depending upon what you're looking for, you might really be surprised at what graphene can do for your industry. Yeah.
We asked this question of all our guests, Debbie, so I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you to kind of look out over the next 10 to 15 years and tell me what you see coming in space commerce.
Okay, so it's a good one and a big one. Let's see. Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at a decade from now, when you think about the goals that they've set for things like net zero and the zero carbon and all of that kind of thing, what I see is that space commerce is active because we have a new space station going up to replace the International Space Station. It's going to be in progress. NASA's scaling back. Axiom Space is coming in and putting the world's first commercial space station. That's in progress. That's already in progress. And you have other entities, like whatever Elon Musk decides to do next. I mean, who knows? He's got all of his plans. You've got plans for people going to the moon, building Moon Village, getting our people, getting our human beings back to the moon where they first stepped. And of course, you have the Artemis Accords to try to keep things in check so that, there's some order about this. I think that in 10 years, you're going to see a lot of the concern about space debris. You'll see that mitigated with the inventions that they have already being put into place, and actually have the opportunity to get up there. So you have the call them the cleaners, whatever, going around and picking up the things that are defunct and making sure that the things that are put up there are much more useful. I see it being a more natural part of life, and that our children that are little, it'll be natural for them. They'll be like, hey, you want to go to the moon for vacation? I don't know. I thought about taking that hotel that's up there. That looks pretty cool because that's not on the moon. I don't really want to go to the moon, And of course, looking ahead to Mars, that'll be coming up beyond it. I also see the space elevator built. Or in the process of being built. It should take, the pace of technology being so quick, it could take less than the 10 to 12 years that they've predicted for the tether to be ready. And, the space elevator could already, just about be ready to be built. By the time 15 years comes along, we could be talking about this in one of those cars, Tom, doing our pod from the end of the line on this.
Well, I might be a little old by then, but if I'm hanging on, then I'll take that ride with you.
Yeah, well, with technology, you don't know. I mean, there's so many things that can extend life and whatever. So
that's true, and some of them will probably include graphene.
Yeah, and I have to probably clarify that for myself. I speak about the space elevator myself because it's something that I'm very fond of. A lot of people find that to be somewhere in between absolutely ridiculous and maybe in 50 years, right? So that's a pretty big range. It's something that I see as a possibility. So, but I definitely see space commerce as being especially with this Stellar Modal Transportation Association being very active in assisting people, having meetings and forging those relationships that are really going to make things work and continue to do so as we head towards Mars.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Ex Terra Podcast. You can subscribe to the audio version of the podcast on Spotify, Apple Music, and many other popular podcasting platforms. Check out our YouTube channel and be sure to click on subscribe to stay up to date on developments in space commerce. You can also get daily space commerce news at xterrajsc.com. And one thing more, be sure to connect with us on LinkedIn and follow us on Twitter at xterrajsc. Until next time, I'm Tom Patton. Thanks for listening.